In the last video, I got this 1541 drive working again. In this video, we're going to be spending a little bit more time with that same drive. This time, we're going to replace its internal power supply with something a little more modern and cool running. The 1541 is known for two things, being really slow and running really hot. And here's why it runs so hot. The back half of the 1541's case is stuffed full with a linear power supply consisting of this absolute beast of a transformer. Then on top, there are the voltage regulators and the remaining circuitry and smoothing capacitors that make up the rest of the power supply. I'm going to remove the old, inefficient linear power supply and replace it with this modern switching power supply from Meanwell. This is a model RPD60A that will convert the AC mains power to 12 volts DC at 2 amps and 5 volts DC at 5 amps. The top case half is still off from the last video, so I'm ready to go. I'll start by pulling the chassis out of the bottom case half. Now that I have the chassis out, I can remove the transformer. No need to be surgical here. I'm not going to try to reuse any of this, so I'm just going to cut everything out of here. This isn't strictly necessary, but I'm going to replace the power connector while I have everything apart. The 1541 has a standard IEC power connector with a built-in noise filter. The noise filter consists of some capacitors that have a tendency to blow, and when they do, they release acrid smelling smoke. I had one pop in a 1540 drive and my kids thought the house was on fire. You can replace it with another connector that has the built-in noise filter, or just a standard IEC power connector. I'm going to go with the standard IEC power connector like the one you see on the left here, but you do you. Now it's time to test fit the new Meanwell power supply and mark the mounting holes with a Sharpie. I'm putting the AC mains input directly behind the IEC power connector that it will connect to. I need to make sure the mounting holes aren't too close to the edge of that void in the case. Before I try to drill these mounting holes, I'm going to give each one a good whack with a center punch. This will prevent the drill bit from walking away from the center of the hole when I start to drill. Now I drill. I don't have a drill press, so I'll be using this battery-powered drill. I don't have cutting fluid, so WD-40 will have to suffice. With all 4 holes drilled, now I'll use a file to clean the burrs off the bottom edges. I'll be mounting the mean well to the chassis of the 1541 using the hardware you see here. Brass standoffs, washers, and nuts. Nothing fancy. I'm going to solder all my connections directly to the Meanwell PCB, so I'll remove the connectors they provide for AC input on the front and DC output on the back. The tip of my desoldering iron is too small to fit over these pins. I'll have to use an unorthodox method of desoldering, but it works. Now I'm ready to start soldering my connections to the Meanwell. On the input side, I'll be soldering the AC load wire to the component hole marked ACL. The neutral wire will connect where it's marked ACN. You really want to make sure you don't get these backward. The output side, my 5-volt wire will connect on V1, my 12-volt wire will connect to V2, and I'll connect 2 ground wires to the common pins in the middle. Finally, I'll ground the Meanwell board to the chassis of the drive from the 2 locations highlighted here. Now I need to clean the solder and leftover bits of wire from the original fuse holder and switch so I can connect new wires to them. I'm ready to start wiring things up on the input side. The schematic shows how the AC power coming in goes through a switch and a fuse. I'm going to leave the fuse there. You don't really need the schematic though. All I'm doing is wiring the new power supply in exactly how the old transformer was wired. Whew, that was painful, but we've got everything soldered on the input side. Now we're just going to heat up the heat shrink tubing and we should be done over there. Now I'm going to hook up the grounds for the power supply. Ideally, I would have used ring terminals to connect these ground wires, but I didn't have any on hand, so I just wrapped the wires around the screws. I'm going to double check that everything's connected properly before I move on. That's it, everything's connected. Now we test. We've got 12. And we've got 5. Now we just need to get this all wired up to the main drive board. I'll be connecting right at the point where the 12 volt and 5 volt regulator outputs are connected now. So the regulators and everything else associated with the factory power supply circuit will be removed. Everything is removed, now I'm ready to wire it up. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be connecting right at the point where the 12 volt and 5 volt regulator outputs used to be. 12 volt there, and 5 volt there. The heat sinks won't be needed, but I'm going to screw this plate back in place anyway, because it will help to support the board when I mount it back to the chassis. Finally, the moment I've been waiting for. It's time to test. I'm just loading the first disc I pulled off the shelf. It happens to be Beyond Castle Wolfenstein. So that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. We have Beyond Wolfenstein loaded there. It's working. Our drive's working. It's a nice, cool running 1541. Good as new. If I do another video, I'm going to try to do some more diagnostics on this. So stay tuned and have a good one. Thank you.